We're Cardi-Girls. We're Cardi-Girls. I'm gonna say what we want. The Cardi-Girls. Singing from the front. The Cardi-Girls. Our mouths are our guns and we here and fighting cause it has to be done. We're gonna say what we want. The Cardi-Girls. Singing from the front. The Cardi-Girls. Our mouths are our guns and we here and fighting cause it has to be done. We're gonna say what we want.
Brag to your friends like
Cardi-Girls. Singing from
it's like a bit of a free-for-all, isn't it, really?
I think there's an assumption that
For a while now, Jodie, while we talk about some of this week's highlights.
Yep, absolutely.
We're gonna say what we
Tucker
want. The
Carlson,
Cardi-Girls. We're singing from the front. The Cardi-Girls. Our mouths are our guns and we here and fighting cause it has to be done.
Hi. How are you?
So, I'm good.
I wonder if we'll have very many people coming in to listen tonight. Let's hope so. Because I think it'll be really interesting for people.
I hope so.
What have you-
Oh,
How's your finger?
yeah. Still attached.
Still there? Still
Yeah.
attached?
Still attached. Quite sore. I just bashed it just then as we were. I just bashed it on the front of my desk. Having the stitches out in the morning. For me, that's the worst part of the whole process. I just get quite oomy when I have to sit there and present my hand to someone with a scalpel, and that's the feeling of the stitches coming out. It's just yuck. Anyway,
Yeah. Horrible.
yes,
They won't will they deaden it?
no.
Oh.
But last time when I had the stitches taken out after I had the cyst removed, I said to the nurse, "I'm sorry, I'm being a bit pathetic." I said, "I really hate anything to do with fingers and toes." And she said, "Oh, don't worry, the man who was in here just a while ago fainted." And I was still holding my own, still sitting there sweating, like sweaty palms and sweaty feet, but I survived. I didn't faint. So
Oh, that's good. Oh, it'll be good then. You have to do some. I don't want to show you my fingers, but in the garden, golly, you won't be able to go in the garden for a minute.
I'm looking forward to being able to bend it. Hopefully,
Bend it. Yes.
Yeah.
There'll be lots of physio, I suppose, to get it back to
I
normal.
guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's all right. I watched the video of how it was done after I had the procedure, which was very wise because it's
Yes.
really not a pretty sight. And it was a woman, same finger, same hand. She was about 10 years older than me, and they showed her progress. And she was saying how, they had said to her that she might not get full range of movement back, but the pain would be gone. But she had quite a lot of movement back, and she could make a fist again. Because I haven't been able to make a fist. Like I can make a fist with my left hand, but I haven't been able to make a fist with this hand for about 10 years.
It's probably just
You're just
persistence.
surprised how often you need to do that.
Yeah, that's right. Open things
Yeah.
and
Open
yes,
things. Yeah.
yeah,
Taps.
that's right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Many things. Yes.
Hmm.
Well,
So-
tonight I'm really excited because I've been chasing this man. That sounds good, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
Usually chase Well, one's enough.
Finally stopped, eh?
Yeah, finally I've been able to track Rex down because he's a busy man and he's
Yeah.
doing great stuff. And I actually I was told about Rex by Jodie from Adelaide,
Yeah.
who works with the Assange campaign. So
Oh, yeah.
she actually suggested, she said, Rex would be a really good person to have. And I said, oh, yeah, most definitely. I'm sure if I just had messaged him, he would have just totally ignored me. But I dropped Jodie's name, I think, so that probably helped.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
really,
really
really
nice.
we eventually worked out a night where he could come along and speak to us because with what he's going to tell us, I think a lot of people would be very unaware of what FOI, you see it in everything, freedom of information, and what we
Yes.
are actually entitled to do. And
Yes.
we're not entitled to ask questions because they tell us to sit down and shut up. So,
Yep.
so Kelly, can we get Rex now?
Before he runs away.
Hi,
There he
Rex.
Hi guys.
I tracked him down before he runs away again.
Yeah.
I just said, Rex, it's been trying to track you down was quite difficult because you're so busy and you're flitting from state to state and place to place. But it's
Yep,
great.
well, I have just moved from my residents in Adelaide to a caravan summit. I'm doing work from Rome now, so I'm basically set myself up with a caravan where I can do work, and I have a different view each day. Often go to a different cafe in the morning and sit down, have a coffee, write a submission, maybe write an article, or put in an FOI.
Wonderful.
Sounds
So,
idyllic.
yeah, it does. So tell us, Rex, people listening may not be aware of what a FOI is, and how did you get involved in doing FOIs?
Okay, so under the law, and there are federal laws and there are state laws, but right across the entire sort of jurisdictional area in Australia, there are acts of parliament that allow people to have access to government information. So in the Federal Act, it's the in the federal domain, it's the Freedom of Information Act. In New South Wales, it's the GIPA Act, which is the Government Information Public Access Act. In Queensland, it's the RTI Act, Right to Information Act. Most other jurisdictions stick with FOI. And so that's what I'll use tonight, FOI. So what is it? Well, we have to step back first, and this may shock your viewers, but everything that the government does, it does on your coin and for public purpose. If they produce a document, actually it's a document that belongs to you. You paid for it. And the FOI Act recognises that. And basically, if I just read from section 11 of the Federal FOI Act, it says, so this is the law, every person has a legally enforceable right to obtain access to information in accordance with the FOI Act. Now, that last little bit means that there are some exceptions. They can stop you getting access to certain information. So if you ask the government to give you information about how deep the Collins class submarines go, or perhaps information on what our intelligence agencies are doing right now, or maybe some tactics by the police force, then they would deny you access because the Act has what are called exemptions that stop you getting access. But the important thing is, if you want a document from government, if you rang an official and said, hey, mate, it's your good friend, I just want to get access to that report that I heard about in the media, that person would say something like, oh, let me see what I can do for you. About a month or two later, they'll come back and say, look, I'm still trying to work with my boss on this. I can't really give it to you yet. And in fact, they can just sort of kick the can down the road. And whereas under the FOI Act, you can, it's like these magic words you can say that turns everything on its head. So if you say the words in an email, this is a request for the purpose of the FOI Act 1982. I seek access to ... That invokes that legally enforceable right. What it means is now the government has to give you the document that you're after, and the burden shifts for them to say you can't have it and this is why. So it's not a case of saying you can have it. The Act starts off by saying you're allowed to have it, and then they must, if they don't want to give it to you, tell you why it's exempt. And normally they have to do that within a particular time frame. In the federal domain, it's 30 days. In New South Wales, for example, under the GIPA Act, it's 20 working days. So it does vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but pretty much using the magic words in the Act, you can invoke that legal enforceable right, and they have to respond to you. That doesn't mean they have to give you the document, and that can end up in a bit of a fight. And I'm well known for fighting on these things, so your viewers might remember back during COVID, Scott Morrison formed up something called the National Cabinet, which was a meeting of Prime Minister and all of the First Ministers from around the nation. And he basically declared that he had a national cabinet. And what that meant was that everything they did was secret. I actually took effectively to the tribunal. The matter was heard by Justice White, by a federal court judge, and as I had applied to the tribunal, the Justice White found that National Cabinet was not a cabinet, and therefore I was allowed access to all of the information that National Cabinet was producing, unless they had some other reason. They couldn't just say blanket secrecy. It's a cabinet meeting. Now, some people say to me, "Well, what did you get?" Actually, it didn't really matter what I got. I was actually just after cracking open the vault, so that anyone else could come along behind me and get access. So that was a big win that I had in 2021. In other cases, if you were to Google my name and Albanese and the word diary, you'll find that I had a bit of a fight with Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister. I asked to see his diary. Now, why would I want his diary? I don't want to see when he's going to the dentist, or if he's got some family event on the weekend. In fact, that's not FOIable because it's not related to government. But I am entitled to see who is influencing our Prime Minister. Who gets a meeting with our Prime Minister? That's absolutely something that I'm allowed to see. I'm also allowed to see whether or not he's just flitting about the country in the VIP jet and wasting my money and your money. So that involved a fight that went on for well over a year, went to a tribunal, and indeed before we actually got to the point where the tribunal was to make a decision, Anthony Albanese gave up. He basically said, actually it was quite funny that the lawyers for the government rang me and said, "Mr. Patrick, we're happy to give you 100 days of the diary that also the Australian Financial Review had requested that overlapped with mine, and we're going to give you an extra 30 days for any period you like." And I'd actually requested 197 days, and I said to them, "Let me think about that." I put the phone down, and then I wrote an article where I talked about Anthony Albanese capitulating on his diary, and that they offered me 100 days plus a set of steak knives to go away. And then I rang the lawyers back and said, "Hey, I'm not going to accept your offer. I'm happy to have a highly contested and very public fight with the Prime Minister." And at that point, they gave in and said, "Okay, you can have all 197 days." So, you can sort of push those things. I've got, in fact, I'm heading back towards South Australia very slowly. I've got a matter in the South Australian Court of Appeal, and that's to do with a claim of parliamentary privilege. Now, I'm a former parliamentarian. I know a lot about parliamentary privilege, and so hopefully I'll win that case. And I've got a silk actually at King's Counsel running that particular case for me. I had another federal court matter today that relates to Snowy Hydro. Now, your might know that Snowy Hydro, that's the pumped hydro proposal to basically pump water up a hill, and then when the wind isn't blowing, the sun isn't shining, they'll let the water flow back down the hill through a turbine, and that generates electricity. And it's a very big project, but it went from 2 billion to 6 billion to 12 billion to ... We don't know how much that's going to cost. I sought access to their project reports. I wanted to see what they were telling the government about whether or not their project was on time and on budget. So I wasn't after any secrets about special techniques they were using to drill holes into the side of mountains. I just wanted to know whether or not our taxpayers' dollars were being spent wisely and whether or not we're up for a bigger bill. I lost.
Sorry, Rex, we forgot to say when we got a question, we're going to go like this.
Okay, not a problem. So I'll just finish that
Yeah,
that example off. That matter is now in the full federal court. Again, I'm being represented pro bono by at this stage by a senior counsel and a junior counsel, and it's actually going to raise some constitutional issues about
Good.
whether or officials can enter into a contract and say everything is confidential, which is exactly what happened in the case of the government's contract with Snowy Hydro. So there's some examples of some of the things that I'm doing in background. Now, the reality is, if I win, and I'm pretty confident I will win this case on the Snowy Hydro stuff, that will actually open up the ability for all Australians to ask for project reviews or project reports from any public funded project. So it's a big case. It's like National Cabinet. It's going to open the door and allow us to see the project reports of all those projects that we're paying for. So examples of some things that I'm doing. FOI exists for the purpose of allowing you to participate in democracy. Information is the currency of power in a democracy, and that's why the government likes to keep all the information locked up, and they tell you what they want to tell you when they want to tell you. And FOI is a disruptor of that, where you can go in and say, well, I want to see what did the department tell the minister, or how much has been spent on something on a particular project. You're allowed to see those documents. So all of those sorts of things allow you to participate in democracy and allows you to scrutinise what your government is doing. Susan.
So, for example, just if I lived in Melbourne and I thought that those bins that they have put for people to plop their machetes in when they're sick of playing with them, if I thought to myself, I don't think that I like the idea of funding that as a Melburnian, am I allowed to ask them how much they cost and how successful they're being, and they should tell me, or am I going to have to jump through hoops to get that?
No, well, they might force you to jump through hoops, but it will depend on how you frame your request. So you might say to the government, I seek access to project documents that reveal the total cost of the machete bin project. I also seek access to documents that show the number of machetes that have been collected over the last 12 months, each and every month. Now, that's a small enough request, because if you can't go to the government and say, I want every document you've got on tax cuts, because you can imagine how many documents they have. You have to narrow and say, over this period, or between this person and this person, or about this topic. And so you can narrow it down to a reasonably small size, so you don't distract the government agencies from their regular work. But the answer to your question, Susanna, is you can ask for any document that is in the possession of the government. They don't have to give it to you, but normally what they will do is they'll say, we've got these 7 documents and we're going to give you access to 3 of them in full, 2 of them partially, and the other 2 we're not going to release to you. And that's when you might have to start the fight.
So the law is that they should just release it. Is that right? But then
that's the default position, is that you have them, except where they can justify an exemption, where they can say the release.
So the onus is on them to say why they can't. And
that's quite interesting.
It has to be a good reason.
You would ask the agency. So in this case, it might be the Australian Federal Police. I don't know who's running that program, but you'd have to identify who's running that project. Maybe it's the Attorney General's Department, and then you would ask them, and they would make the decision. And so they're in control of it. They can say, no, you can't have it. When they do that, you have a review right, you can say, I'd like the Information Commissioner to take a second look at this. And at that point, it no longer is the agency making the decisions. Now, the agency has to convince the Information Commissioner that you can't have access to it. So a lot of times what happens is you put a request in and you get a letter back, and it's got an official letterhead, an Australian coat of arms, and it's from the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet or somewhere, and then there's a lot of legal stuff, and they'll say, and the end result is you can't have it. It's almost like when you have an insurance company say at first instance, no, you're not covered, and you've got to push back, and that's the skill. You've got to have a bit of tenacity to take on the government. But I think all your viewers are probably of that sort of nature. Okay.
Now,
Right, yeah.
I think I spoke to you. I actually put a Freedom of Information into ASIC about some information I found out with the ATO and ASIC. I can't get a straight answer from anyone. And I think you said to me, it came back and it basically said they could not disclose the information that I had requested because it may embarrass a government agency.
Yeah, look, I'd be surprised if they said that, because the FOI Act, the Federal Act, actually says quite specifically that an agency or a minister cannot refuse a document on the basis it would cause embarrassment to government. Specifically says that in the Act, in Section 11B of the Act, actually says
Right.
I think.
Well, there'd be quite a few things that embarrass them, wouldn't there? So someone thinking ahead on that.
I wouldn't have known.
So the ultimate test is that, and this is the general principle behind all of the exemptions, is would the release of the information be injurious to the public interest? That's ultimately what's going to happen.
Then you're onto something.
Yeah, well, and a lot of times I end up in fights where the government says, if we tell you that, it's going to cause our officials to not be so frank and fearless next time. And of course, my immediate response is, how fearless is advice if you fear the public seeing it? It doesn't make any sense. And in fact, at the start of this year, I won a decision in the Administrative Review Tribunal where I argued the point. I explained the environment that officials work in. And the Public Service Act actually requires all public servants to be professional, act with integrity, with honesty, be open and transparent with the Australian public, and to give honest, fulsome, apolitical, evidence-based advice. And what the tribunal said on the basis of my submissions in their decision that they handed down is that there is no ability for a public servant to back off on their advice. The law says they must always be most professional in everything they do. And so they can't say, I'm going to back off on their advice. In fact, I had the great pleasure of cross-examining a very senior public servant who originally made that claim. I pointed out to her, here's what the Act says. Now I want to try and reconcile what the Act says and what you're saying. And she backed off. She had to back off because she realised that actually, if you back off on your advice as a public servant, you are breaking the law. And the tribunal basically said, if that sort of thing is occurring, the proper remedy is not to stop Mr. Patrick having the document. The proper remedy is to pull the public servant to one side and remind them of their role and what they're paid to do, and if necessary, to initiate disciplinary action.
That's when you would have to take it to court, though, probably.
No, so that basically what the tribunal. So when you deal with FOI requests like I do, I'm not trying to change the policy. So your policy, where Susanna, where you said that you don't like the machete project and don't like the idea of paying for it. FOI is not a mechanism for you to directly challenge the project. What it does do is allow you to have access to information so that you can better mount a campaign. to say, for example, this is costing us $1 million a year, and 10 machetes get handed over.
That's right. Yeah.
There's $100,000 per machete. That's not value for money. So again, that's information is the powerful thing that you get. The government would rather you didn't have that, but the Act, the FOI Act, actually grants you a right of access to it. Now, unfortunately, sometimes you have to fight a long time. So I've actually got some matters in the Administrative Review Tribunal where I've actually won after 3 or 4 years of fighting, and then the government appeals it. So, to string things out even further. So that can wear people down. So you've got to be tough. Okay, you got to, when I do FOI training courses, I issue the students with a transparency Jedi apprentice certificate. I've got little point scores on how to become a master Jedi transparency fighter. So you do have to concentrate on being a little. You have to be a bit tenacious, and you have to remember that the FOI Act is not about litigating the issue per se. It's about getting access to the information. You focus on that. Once you get the information, you can then do something with that. Give it to the media. Use it to provide to a politician, or alternatively, use it to develop your own social media campaign or something. And
Make people aware. Yeah.
You'll see that what I do when I get access to information is I feed it back into the media. I don't know if your viewers know, I'm a former senator in the federal parliament, and so I have about 500 journalists' numbers in my phone, and I keep in contact with them, and indeed sometimes train them, and I'll look and say, right, I've now got some really interesting information. I'm going to feed that to a particular journalist, or sometimes I also write myself for Michael West Media, and I'll use the information in the story. Or, of course, I'm very fortunate. I've got the phone number of most senators and a number of ministers, and I can send them a text, or I can send them a document and say, guys, this is pretty interesting. So so I'm in a really nice position, but there's no reason why your viewers can't
participate,
get information and then use that information as part of a strategy.
Somebody's written,
the relevant legislation is the Freedom of Information of Request Act. If one a pensioner or is poor, you can ask for a fee waiver. Oh, so you have to pay for the privilege.
Yes and no. Depends on the jurisdiction you're in. So in the federal jurisdiction, there is no fee.
No, mine's free.
However, if you have a request that involves a lot of work, they can charge you. It's free. It's generally free. If you can manage the size of your request, and that means you've got to think about it before you put it in. How do I avoid them coming back with an unreasonable diversion of resources claim, which means they don't process it? Alternatively, they say, well, we're going to process this, it's going to cost you $600. In state jurisdictions, so in South Australia, it's $41.30. But you can, if you're a pensioner, seek a waiver. Likewise, in New South Wales, in fact, all the other jurisdictions where there is a charge, it's a small charge, but if you can show that you're a pensioner or that you can't afford it, they can waive that cost. And if they don't, you can appeal their decision not to waive the cost. So there can be charges involved, but if you're careful, you can avoid all of them.
Actually, I think it's a really good idea because people think we have nowhere to go, Rex. They think just as the general public, you've got nowhere to go. But this is a really good out. Anybody could sit down and write a couple of sentences and send it to the right people just to get a response back, because I get frustrated because we talk about all the problems, but we don't seem to do anything about it. So this is doing something about it. Ask the question.
That's right. And so, and in actual fact, if you go, just so your viewers know, if you go to any government website, www.defence.gov.au, and you scroll down, there'll be a little tab that says something like freedom of information or access to information, something along those lines, and you can click on that and it tells you exactly how to go about doing it. Okay, so don't get upset when you get your first refusal. When you get your first refusal, like I'm very good at it now. If I get a request that says there are 7 documents, you can't have any of them, that's a secret story, right? I go back and beat them up in the media and say, here's a government that's being secret. I've got a matter in the court at the moment, the full federal court, that's where I'm trying to get access to documents, to a document that you paid for. You paid about $500,000 for, and that's a document that sets out the process for where AUKUS nuclear waste is going to be stored in Australia. So there's a document that exists that talks about how they're going to select a site, but the government is keeping it secret from you. And I've had to go all the way to the full federal court to have a fight to get access to that. So, but along the way, I just keep hitting them with secrecy story. That is a document that doesn't go to how to fight a submarine in a war. It's about where you put the waste at the end of the submarine's life. It can't possibly be secret because when they finally do build a facility, I think we're going to notice.
Yeah. It'll be out of date by the time they build it.
Well, AUKUS is a really interesting one. I often talk to FOI officers because I engage with a lot of them. They all know who I am. So there's always sometimes an advantage in when I do it because they look and go, it's Rex. We better get it.
Better do it.
There have been 2 FOIs and I get a lot more than the other person because they just know that it's not going to end with their decision. And the other thing I do, as well as saying, hey, this is government secrecy, I get a friendly senator. I often use Jackie Lambie, but I've got there's other senators that I use to ask a question as to particularly get into a court or into a tribunal. I say, how much are you spending resisting giving Mr. Patrick those particular documents? And I can tell you the number, and everyone needs to sit down for this, the number in terms of how much the government has spent losing to me. Okay, so the number's bigger for all of the cases, but for losing to me, the government has spent $1.6 million on lawyers.
Right.
Secrecy is much more expensive than transparency.
Actually, somebody just asked Rex, previous comment, that when you questioned the National Cabinet, the magistrate stated it was treasonous. It wouldn't have been a magistrate though, would it? It would have been a...
No. So the person who dealt with that was, he's now retired. It was Federal Justice White, and he didn't talk about it being treasonous. And again, when you get into an FOI fight, you get into this really technical thing, and one of them is, in my instance, and the reason I knew that it couldn't have been right is that one of the reasons you're not allowed to see cabinet documents is not because of the content, but we don't like the idea that you can see that the finance minister has a different view to the treasurer, who has a different view to the prime minister. That undermines confidence in government, and so that's the only reason, really, why cabinet documents are kept secret, so that you can't see the different views and you get the feeling that your government is one. Now, of course, when you looked at the National Cabinet, particularly during COVID, you'd see Scott Morrison step out saying, we're opening the borders. And then you'd see Mark McGowan, the West Australian Premier, saying, no, I'm not. So there's no clarity.
Yeah.
Okay, you see the Prime Minister saying, we're opening the schools, and Gladys Berejiklian saying, nah, not doing that. So they didn't have what's called cabinet solidarity, and in actual fact, unlike a normal cabinet, so the Prime Minister's cabinet, Anthony Albanese's cabinet, he is a group of ministers that all work for within the same polity, whereas National Cabinet had a Prime Minister from the federal domain and the South Australian Premier, who doesn't have any devotion or duty to the Prime Minister. He has a duty to the South Australian public, and likewise for the New South Wales Premier, Victorian Premier, and so forth. So just this idea there was a cabinet was completely flawed, which is why I took them on in court, and that's why I won.
So what did they come up with? So was there any lashback, or, when you had a win with that, they just provided the information?
Well, it's very interesting. Again, I was in the Senate at the time, and what happens when you get a decision, as I did, where Justice White said, Mr. Patrick can have these documents, I then had to wait another 28 days because the government had a right of appeal. They could have appealed that particular decision to the next highest court. And so I waited my 28 days. On day 28, they wrote to me and said, okay, you can have the documents. Here they are. But in the Parliament, the Prime Minister then tabled a bill to try and overturn the decision. So there's a notion that Parliament is supreme. So if a court says something, because they act within the law, one of the things that a parliamentarian can then do, or a government can then do, is try and convince the Parliament to override the decision. So they introduced a bill to try and override that decision, except it found no friends, and it never went anywhere.
No, funny times. They were like 7 different states. Yes, doing their own thing. Yeah, well, amazing.
They are different states, and they are entitled to do their own thing. They're different political jurisdictions with different governments. And, we set out in our constitution what the federal government's responsible for, and the rest remains with the state government. That's why it's confusing. When you're trying to deal with health, for example, and you say, who's in charge? Well, if it's a hospital, the state government's in charge. If it's a doctor's surgery, the federal government's in charge. So it's always a bit confusing. So
it's a mishmash.
Well, it is.
Probably for a reason.
Yeah. Well, I give your viewers a bit of a tip. The federal government takes care of frontline services. So the doctor is the first person you go and see. So the federal government pay for the doctor. When they refer you to an expert or refer you to a hospital or something like that, that's when the state government starts paying. Likewise, pharmacists are federally funded. They're frontline people that you can sort of access quite readily. So again, that's a bit off track, but I do want to from time to time FOI health departments around the country. In fact, yesterday was involved in another tribunal hearing. I don't know if your listeners, your viewers remember, back during COVID, the government handed out some grants to develop a COVID vaccine, and one of the entities they handed the grant out to was to University of Queensland, and they took a bunch of Commonwealth funds, and then they didn't produce a solution. And I did some requests around that because I have a view that, particularly grant money, that's our money being given to somebody else.
It's private business.
Right to understand what happened in that circumstance. Why was why was the University of Queensland picked over, say, Vaccine, which is a South Australian company with a very well-known guy named Professor Petrosky.
Nikolai Petrosky, yeah.
So, why didn't he get the grant? And so I did some inquiry around that. And actually, even as a senator, I remember asking the the organisation that issued the funds for all our medical grants. They didn't want to tell anyone anything. And
No.
I remember at the time saying, well, this is a corruption incubator, I think were the words that I used. And
That's a good one.
yeah, and so I ran with that. Again, if you Google my name and the word corruption incubator, you'll be able to read the story.
I have to read that. Corruption. That covers a lot of things. The corruption incubator.
So I've actually won that case, and so now we're in a position where if someone wants to understand how it is, and look, I'm very strategic and tactical when I do an FOI, so I don't ask for all of the grant applications. I say I want to see the grant application of the person who won, or the entity that won the grant, because that ties in with the spending of public money. They got handed the public money, and so that's when I say the great public interest in us seeing how that money was allocated.
Actually, I just don't understand the whole grant thing. Is the amount of money. If you're in private business, that's why you're in private business. I don't understand all this money that's given to private entities. Anyway, well, that's another story.
My short explanation on that is that there are many things that private companies won't do because there might be too much risk involved, where you might have to inject public funds to be able to get people to go off and do something. But in my view, whenever there's those sorts of funds required, my preference is take an equity stake where it doesn't just hand the money over. They say, we're going to invest, we're going to own 10% of the company or 20% of the company. So here's some money. We now own part of the company. We now get to see what's going on. And we're also going to make sure you pay the right amount of tax. So, so in my view, that would be a better way of doing that. And the government, the Albanese government has now started doing that. Again, lots of pressure being placed on from the outside with people like myself and others campaigning on that.
Oh, somebody's just said, it shits me, it's our money and they spend it like the drunken sailors.
Can I just say I'm a former submariner, so maybe I could reflect on that comment and say, yep, no, exactly. I've been a drunken sailor, having landed from a submarine after being at sea for 8 weeks with just a pocket full of cash.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
So you used to work in submarines, like actually in the submarine?
Yeah, so I was a submariner. So I left school when I was 16 and I joined the Navy. And for some reason, I thought going to submarines would be a good idea. And I think what happened was I kind of liked the idea of the Navy, but I didn't like the idea of getting wet. Right? the best place to go to not get wet in the Navy is in a submarine.
It's a submarine. But if you're going to get wet, you're going to get really wet.
If you get wet in a submarine, you're in a spot of bother. So I served on Oberon class submarines, and then I was part of the trials crew for the Collins class. So it's actually quite interesting. A lot of people, if you Google Rex Patrick and AUKUS, you'll see I write a lot about that because I'm one of the few people in Australia who've I've actually been to see on Greek submarines, on South Korean submarines, on Norwegian submarines, and US nuclear-powered submarines I've been to see on as well. So I have quite a good perspective on some of those issues. And of course, when I was a senator, I was part of the Defence, Foreign Affairs and Trade oversight.
Well, that's good that you knew what you were talking about.
Yes, doesn't happen in that big white building.
I know.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, that you hear the term submariner, and you said it before.
Yeah.
No point did I think to myself, that's what you are called if you're in a submarine. Like you would go if you work in a submarine. It's just one of those terms you don't ever put two and two together because you don't meet submarine boat captains or submarine drivers every day of the week, do you?
Submarine drivers.
There's not a lot of us around. So I picked a job with very few other submariners, and then I went to another job where there are very few senators as well. So I like to be in a sort of niche market. But look,
niche market, yeah.
So I often tell people my first job in the Navy was scullery. I was doing the scullery job, so I went from scullery to the Senate. But what I will say, sometimes you'll hear the word submariner. That's a US, that's a United States
Right.
pronunciation. So in
Right.
Australia we say submariner.
Submariner.
Yeah.
So how long would you be underwater for?
Actually, anything up to 8 weeks at a time underwater without contact from anyone. And
It can't be very good for your vitamin
Health.
D levels.
well, it's one of those things you do. You serve your country. I spent a lot of time on those submarines, and as a young tacker, I loved it. It was a great job. I was doing lots of really interesting stuff, and I was involved in electronics, keeping all the electronics on the submarine working, but also operating a lot of the tracking equipment and weapon control equipment and so forth. So it's a pretty cool job actually. But,
it would be very cool. It's just that you don't get to see out a window, do you? Or do they have windows?
No, they have a little window on the periscope. Okay, so you can look at the periscope. There are no windows on submarines, and you don't necessarily know whether it's night or day. There are ways of telling, but yeah. So it's a very, very interesting. You have to go and do a psychological test, and I used to say to people, if you fail, you're in.
Were you a soap dodger?
Soap dodger.
Somebody says we call the submariners soap dodgers.
Well, okay, that's because I've got to be careful when you talk about soap and bath and showers. But the saying we used to have on a submarine, because there wasn't a lot of water, we used to say that we would have a shower once a week, whether we needed it or not.
Oh, imagine it.
Say, now that I'm living in a caravan, there are times where I go to a caravan park that has a fully serviced
bathrooms.
I connect the water up and the power up and so forth. Right now, if you look out behind me is the Goondiwindi Airport. I am sitting in the middle of a paddock in a self-contained caravan with limited water, and I've got to manage the power. But finally, all those government funds that train me in how to manage scarce resources is coming to fruition. I'm getting something back.
That's good. Oh, well, Rex, thank you so much for that. I think there's the website, everybody. Transparency. Just think of Transparency Warrior. I had a look on the website. It's really good. It's got lots of really good information on it. So hopefully people will start asking questions. Don't bristle.
Can someone in Melbourne ask about the machete bins, please, and get back to me? I'd love to know whether they've been a rip snorting success.
If it's a federal campaign, you can ask about it. And actually, it turns out I do. I often do GIPPers in New South Wales, or I've got a matter in the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. So you don't have to live there to do it.
That's the question.
What I will say to you is that, and maybe this is the note I leave your listeners or your viewers on, an FOI a day stops democracy decay.
Say that again, Rex, sorry.
An FOI a day stops democracy decay. Okay?
Oh, that's brilliant.
Have you got a T-shirt? You need that on your T-shirt.
Yeah.
So I try and live by that. Every morning I wake up. And it's interesting. I look at the newspapers and I say, okay, there's lots of interesting stuff in the papers. I look and go, I think that issue is going to blow up in 3 to 6 months' time.
Yeah.
I'm going to start collecting information on that.
Plenty of material. Yeah, plenty of material.
I go. So, FOI a day stops democracy decay. Everyone should do it. Put at least 1 or 2 FOIs in your life as a good civic duty. Keeps the government on their toes.
Honest.
Okay. Well, I might find out about the machete bins myself.
Yes, Susanna, you can do that. You can write. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Rex, for eventually coming along, and good luck with the cases that you have in hand now.
Good luck with your travels too.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. And look, if people do want to do something, I can potentially help them.
Yeah.
Obviously, I have to charge a fee for that. But
Of course.
from time to time, I also just say, look, this is how you do it. So there are times when it's better off when people do it themselves.
You better start running big courses. You'd have hundreds coming.
Well, I actually I do run courses. So
Yeah.
I run courses. So I've run courses for the ABC. I run them for senators and MPs' officers. I've got one coming up for the press gallery in a couple of weeks' time. So I do actually teach people how to do it.
Good.
So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right. Oh, that's great. So thank you
Thank
again.
you so much.
And safe and happy travelling.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
We're
Thanks,
ready
Rex.
to go, Kelly. Thanks for having us again. See you next week, next fortnight, Kay. Thanks, Rex.
Yes. See you then.
See you, everyone.
Living ghosts, we chose to live and die as their worker bees. Why didn't we break out from their hide? Why didn't we follow